It's not right for this campus to be so quiet. I know the summer break has begun, but the quiet reminds me too much of the virus and what we had to do to keep everyone safe. I know it was necessary, but still. The library should have been packed with students studying for their exams. Every building, every green spot should have been filled with happy faces. COVID-19 changed all that. And people should have spent their last weeks here playing frisbee, talking about what they're doing this summer or when they'll start their new job. They should have left the sports center celebrating victories or just saying how much they'll miss each other when they leave. When they leave. Freed-Hardeman is quieter now than it's ever been. I guess that makes it easier to hear her stories. What would she tell us about the time she's seen? 2 world wars, the Great Depression, the Civil Rights Movement? Maybe her stories are really our stories. Stories remembered by the men and women whose lives were changed by their time here. Maybe it's time to hear those stories. Thank you for joining us. This evening, we want to share with you just a handful of the thousands of stories that make up Freed-Hardeman University. The 150th anniversary of this great school has reminded us that our heritage is made up of more than big events and important buildings. It's composed of quiet conversations held after curfew, of once-in-a-lifetime memories of victories won on the field or the court, of friendships made as freshmen that remain 50 years later, of instructors who gave us more than just an education, and of staff members who changed our lives. I've interviewed 5 amazing people with great stories to share. Dr. Milton Sewell, whose legacy of service to Freed-Hardeman stretches back for decades but will impact us forever. Coach Estes and his love for baseball players, which is matched only by one special person who you'll learn about tonight. Some of us grew up on this campus and have some special stories to tell. Matthew Johnson, a recent FHU grad, tells some of those stories. Finally, who doesn't love spending time with Drs. Karen and Sharon CYPRESS? Their influence here has been deep and broad, but it's their love and laughter we cherish the most. Along the way, you'll hear more stories sent in by faculty, staff, alumni, and even friends of FHU. Stories that remind us of the power of this place. Thank you for sharing in these stories from our Freed-Hardeman family. Let's get started.
One thing about being a member of the Freed-Hardeman family is that we get things that nobody else would get because we've been on that campus. We've been on that campus in February when 1,000 lectureship guests come and they look like they're dressed in the cover of Bad Leisure Suits Quarterly, and they ask you, where is Auditorium E? Looking at their little brochure, and you say, okay, we're at Auditorium D, so you go to C, B, all the way back to A, and then go past A, up some stairs and around the corner, and there's Auditorium E. We get that. We get what it's like, some of us, to travel with Freed-Hardeman, I mean, on that Silver Eagle with Lee Grantham driving for years. No matter what year you graduated, you probably remember Lee Grantham. And we had some great times on that bus. And I think about a memory that I remembered because of this pandemic, because of this quarantine that we're in now. I had totally forgotten this happened before that. But we had performed at a school as a Pied Pipers. We get back on the bus. Hank McDaniel says, "You guys did an awesome job, and I've got a bag of candy, for you, but you can't handle it because you've been handling the kids. You've been out there with the public. You don't know what germs you've got on your hands, so everybody open your mouth." And he walked in and he dropped candy in each one of our mouths. And that's just a special little memory that about probably 12 people can remember and understand. But these trips were wonderful, and Hank was wonderful. And I remember after my mom got cancer while I was in school, and I was devastated, as you all understand, and as anyone would be. And this was before cell phones, this was before texting, before even email. And so how he learned, I'll never know, because it was a matter of like an hour between the time I learned and that big huge phone that's still attached to the wall rang. And I picked it up and it was Hank McDaniel, and he said, "I want you to know that I love you, that I understand what you're going through, and that we are praying for you." That's family. That's the Freed-Hardeman family. That is that special relationship between students and faculty, between students and staff. And I have seen it over and over. It's happened over again in my life. It's happened over and over again in my children's lives, that they can call their professors at home. My children have called the professors while they were at home and said, "What do I do about this?" And it's a environment where the faculty care so much about the students that I don't think is seen anywhere else.
Some of my favorite memories of life at FHU happened really in the ordinary context of life on campus. It was late night talks with my roommates, going with friends to the Chester County Barbecue Festival, which in September 2010 is where I met my wife, or the woman who would become my wife. It wasn't big events on campus that necessarily were the most important to me, but it was the small things and the small relationships and friendships. As far as a big event, I was a student manager for the men's basketball team, and in 2013-14, that season, our team went 29-6 and made it to the Elite Eight in the national tournament. And that was a really important, special experience, special thing to be a part of. As far as other, main events, really, intramural, volleyball, softball championships, at the time those were really, really exciting. But looking back on it now, the things that have meant the most to me were the people that invested time in me and the people that I got to invest time and experience into. The professors at FHU were great. I'll never forget when Kippy Myers would invite the philosophy students into his home to eat ice cream and watch Alfred Hitchcock movies and talk philosophy. That was always fun. But your professors, always seem to have an open door and encourage you to come by and talk about, maybe material you were struggling with, or just, if you needed counsel or advice. And I always appreciate that. And when people ask me, what was FHU like for you? I tell them quite honestly, FHU gave me everything I could ever want in life, and that is a good foundation to my education, great friends, and a wife.
My favorite memory while playing at Freed was my junior season. We were ranked number 8 going into conference tournament, and of course Missouri Baptist was ranked number 1, and we had to travel to their field to play them, and ended up beating them and upset them on their home field, and that was an incredible feeling. My favorite thing that Coach Elliott says is sometimes he gets frustrated by maybe lack of effort or the game not going as we want it, and he'll throw his hands in the air and yell, "Help me, Rhonda." Nobody really knows who Rhonda is. So, my advice to incoming freshmen would be that this is going to be some of the best times of your life, and you're going to train really hard, and sometimes you're going to feel like giving up, but don't, because you're going to meet some of the greatest people on your team, and you're not going to have a spot handed to you, so you're going to have to work hard to earn it, but it's all going to be worth it. And don't take it for granted, and soak it all in, because when it's gone, and you're going to really miss it one day.
One of the best decisions I think that I've made as a coach was probably 6 or 8 years ago. I decided to adopt a student program with our baseball program, and I'm at ESTES Church of Christ in a Bible class on a Wednesday night, and I just asked the class, which one of you adults in here would be interested in participating in this activity that we're going to have, where I want to match up players with families in Henderson that are strong, and give these players an opportunity to be around not only great families, but great Christian families that have a strong husband and wife combo, and have children that love the Lord. And I just wanted our guys to be around as much of that as possible. We had a lot of people who volunteered to do that. And it's something that we've done every single year. The relationships that we've been able to develop between players and these families, it goes off the field, it goes into their houses, it goes into congregations in the area. It's just been a great part of what we've been trying to do here, is not only win baseball games, but grow these young men into successful people in the future.
Talk about how Dr. Vyers got involved in the lives of your students and the athletes here.
Dr. Vyers has been great with our program. I told somebody one time that one of the best decisions I've made at Freed-Hardeman is getting Dr. Vyers involved with our program, because he has just given so much of himself to our program. He has frequent lunch meetings where he gets a chance to talk to them about not only what's going on right now, but also talk about their future and how he can try to help them to focus on what they want to do with their lives. Several of our players that have decided to put Christ on in baptism have been as a result of personal Bible studies that Dr. Vyers has done with them. In 2018, our senior closer, Bo Cavanis, was one of Dr. Vyers' first mentees that he had really worked with a lot and developed a relationship over the course of 5 years. Bo had the idea that, and Josh Sears, who's another one of Dr. Vyers' mentees that he's worked with and has gotten really close with, they decided to present Dr. Vyers with a baseball bat that all the players had signed, and they did that after we had won a game. Dr. Vyers got into the team huddle with us, and Dr. Vyers is the one who broke us down to 1, 2, 3 family, and he mentioned how that was one of the highlights of his career, being a band director. He's always pointing out that he feels a little odd sometimes being around the athletes, because he wasn't an athlete, but our guys love him. He's made a huge impact on our program. He's made a huge impact on me on a routine basis. When I see him at church, he's like, "Hey, I was talking to Connor Colsheen on the phone the other day. Connor's been graduated from Freed-Hardeman for 5 years, and he's still having these communications and talking to these guys and keeping up with their lives, and it's just a blessing."
I saw the other day in his office that bat is encased, beautifully displayed on his wall, and I don't blame him. That represents a very important part of what Freed-Hardeman's all about.
At Freed, the central feature of our daily routine was chapel. I love chapel because it was personal. Like if you weren't there, someone would miss you, or you would miss something important. Chapel was held in Chapel Hall. And Chapel Hall had a personality. Chapel Hall had character. The chairs were made out of wood, so were the floors, and they creaked when you walked on them. Chapel Hall made you feel like the spirits of past generations were still hanging around. The doors to Chapel Hall had Chapel Hall written right on them, and everybody knew that chapel was the most important thing that happened there. Chapel Hall was like a holy place to me. Nobody ever had to tell me to be quiet. I used to go there at odd hours, especially when I was troubled by the sins in my life. I would sit in my seat, and somehow in that quiet, holy place, I could pray more fervently than I did at church, because in Chapel Hall, prayer was personal. Late one afternoon, I was in Chapel Hall alone, sitting in my seat and praying. I heard one of the rear doors open, and a few minutes later, a large pair of hands rested gently on my shoulders. It startled me a little, and I turned around to find Brother Dixon, the school president, standing behind me. Without saying anything, he just stood there for several minutes with his hands on my shoulders. When he sat down, he bowed his head, and without raising it, he said, "Were you praying, John?" I said, "Yes, sir. I'm afraid I'm not a very good person." "Oh, John," he said, "you will discover that there is more good in you than you realize. I'm glad to know that others come here to pray. I've been doing it for years. Would you like to pray together?" I said, "I'd like that very much." Brother Dixon said, "I often kneel when I come in here. Would you mind kneeling with me?" And so we did. The president of the school and the wayward student. We knelt in the row, facing the chairs with our arms and heads resting on the seat bottoms. And Brother Dixon prayed that God would help me to be a better student, and that God would help him to be the kind of man who the students would respect and look up to. And that's what I mean when I say that Chapel Hall was a holy place. The president of the school had come there to pray for the same reason I did, because he felt the presence of God there in some special way that he did not feel in his office. And finding a student there, he had not been ashamed to get on his knees and pour out his soul before the throne of God, confessing his sins and his desire to be a better man, more like Jesus. Some years ago, I went back to Freed, and to my great delight, I found that although they don't use Chapel Hall for chapel anymore, they had not changed it. They have a new air-conditioned building with carpeted floors and padded seats. It's an airtight, sanitary plastic auditorium that will seat 2,000 people. But you know, they do not call it Chapel Hall.
Old Main is the architectural anchor of Freed-Hardeman University, and we're sitting in Chapel Hall that is arguably the most significant single room on this campus.
Yes.
Tell us about some of your memories here.
I can still take you to the seat that I sat in. And I remember the chapel programs. Of course, the singing in here. This room just vibrates with the beautiful singing. And of course, when Brother Dixon addressed the room, the whole room was quiet and careful. The Thursday chapel programs, the skits, were always, you never knew what was going to happen. And I remember Al Price, and they had a chapel program, and it was a spiritual about Paul and his imprisonment. And he was out and he was making his defense, and he had his arms down, and he pulled his arms up, and there was a chain, except for these chains. I met Miss Laurel when she was a first grader and I was a third grader at Mars Hill Bible School. And in the 8th grade, she was in the 8th grade and I was in the 10th grade. I had just gotten my driver's license and lived out in the country and wanted to learn to drive the car better. So I talked to my daddy into letting me go to the Larimore Business College. They had a typing class. And I convinced him to let me go take that typing class. And at that typing class, I saw Laurel, and we'd have been in school, but I'd never been around her. But we stopped by a drugstore. We sat down and had a Coke float together, and we still can't remember. We think it was 2 Coke floats, because we certainly wouldn't have drunk out of the same straw or the same Coke float at that time. But at that moment, I saw something in her that I'd never seen before, and it changed my life. And everybody in the future that I dated, I compared them to her. And we got married the year after I'd finished my bachelor's degree. She's been a wonderful wife, and boy, she was so supportive of me while I was president at Mars Hill, while I was president here. And she's so gifted, so talented. She was a good mother to our children. And when the idea of coming to work at Freed-Hardeman, she was right there with me.
My memories include going to church here. The church building had burned in 1938 on Crook Avenue across from where President Freed lived. From that pulpit stand and these seats, I can remember Brother C.P. Rowland, my grandfather, Brother Rivenbark, Brother Hardeman, and others preaching, and we'd rotated on Sundays. I was sitting in the last seat of the front section with my mother. My grandmother was on the front or second row, and I decided while Brother Hardeman was preaching, I wanted to go sit with my grandma. And I wouldn't be still. And my mother said, now if you go, we'll have to have a conversation when you get home. And so I went and sat with Grandma for a little while, and my guilt began to play upon me. And I said, I need to go back and sit with my mother. And she said, well, if you go, we're going to give you a whipping when you get home. So Walker Whittle came in 1953 from Georgia. Walker Whittle took care of us students. He loved his students. And in fact, Walker Whittle is in large measure responsible for the fact that Frida and I are sharing a house today. She had come from Hohenwald to go to school. She wanted to major in home economics, and all of her classes were filled. It was the end of the day, and she was crying. And she was just about to go home. And he said, why, little girl, we're not going to let you go home. Come over here and sit down. And he sat down with her. Well, Whittle wasn't going to lose an opportunity to keep a student and gain a major. So all of a sudden, her interest in being a home economics major was obviated, and she became a business major. When we were at Peabody College in Nashville, Frida was studying business, I was studying music. Adrian Doran, who was president of Morehead State University and college at the time, called Brother Gardner and Brother Dixon and said, Don Flatt is retiring from the preaching and going to teach full-time in the history department, and we need a young couple to come and preach for us, and we'll help them get their graduate degrees and their baccalaureate degrees and give them student faculty housing and pay them some. And Brother Gardner and Brother Dixon thought of us. And they sent us up there. And it was the first time we were on our own, really. And we just flourished. He thought of me before anything else. So he was a visionary. He loved the school as much as anybody. I cannot reduce to prose how much he meant to me, means to me. But there's Brother Dixon, there's Brother Doyle, there's all these teachers I've talked about. I mean, it is somebody can't go somewhere and get as many sets of influences as people who were just here had on me and hundreds of others.
One of my very earliest memories as a child is singing with my grandmother Norman from her church songbook in her living room. I I'm not sure how young I was, but at some point I started to learn harmonizing by singing alto with her. When I was having a hard time, she would just say, "Close your eyes and listen. You will hear it and it will be beautiful." And I'm not real sure how beautiful it was, but that's what my grandmother told me. Years later, I was singing with the Madrigals at Freed Hardeman, and she was so proud. One Sunday afternoon in 1968 or 69, we were singing at my grandmother's congregation in Crowder, Missouri, outside of Sikeston, Missouri. Much to my disappointment, my grandmother could not come to hear us sing because my granddad had just come home from the hospital, so neither could come to the concert. After our performance, we got on the bus to leave, and to my surprise, we arrived at my grandmother's small white wood frame house in Crowder, Missouri, and got out of the bus. We sang several songs on that front lawn that spring afternoon with my grandparents sitting on the front porch. The last song that we sang was my favorite, Lamb of God. As we sang, I looked up at my grandmother on that front porch, and she was smiling with her eyes closed. When we got back on the bus, John Bob said, "I believe that's the best performance we've ever done." Thank you, John Bob Hall, for taking the time out of a very busy schedule for us to sing at my grandmother's house that day. Where else but Freed Hardeman would that have happened? Over 50 years have passed since then. I'm now about the age of my grandmother, the age she was that spring day. And if I close my eyes, I can still hear us singing Lamb of God on that front lawn. What a beautiful memory for me. Thank you, John Bob.
Hi, I'm Caleb Gard, and I have a lot of fond memories from back in the day at Freed Hardeman when I got a degree in Bible studies. For example, I remember Ralph Gilmore telling us about law and grace. "Well, you see here, the paradigm is just like the two lenses on these glasses. Whoa!" And then there was David Powell's class. "Why don't you marry my sweet Katie?" And of course, Kippy Myers taught us apologetics. "Hey man, that's a really wild theory. Evolution? Crazy, man." And then I took Greek from Kevin Youngblood. Kalihimera Greek students, did you know that if you say "lego me ego" to a Greek person, he's not going to give you his waffle? And then there was Mark Blackwelder, who taught us about the life of Christ. "Hey man, I really like Jesus. I just love the way he does things." All jokes aside, I remember all these characters because of their character. They didn't just teach us about Bible. The men at this university cared enough to show us how to live it out. They taught us and guided us how to live out the scriptures so that when we left, we didn't just know a lot about the Bible, we knew Jesus. And I really appreciate that. And I'll always carry those memories with me wherever I go. And so I leave you with one final impression in memory of Stan Mitchell. God be with you. Go with God.
And when I think back at my time at Freed Hardeman, I have distinct memories. Some of them involve the lifelong friendships that I made while I was at Freed Hardeman. Some of them would have to involve dorm life and all the adventures and the antics and sometimes frustrations that came along with that. I also think of the teachers that I had who helped train me to be what I wanted to be and wanted to do with my life. Men like R.C. Oliver, Dow Flatt, Coleman Crocker, and of course Billy Smith and Earl Edwards and Ralph Gilmore. Ralph came to Freed Hardeman when I was there, and I remember the very first class I had with him. It was Christian Evidences, and we went into that class thinking, boy, we know a lot, we're Bible majors. And within the first 10 minutes of that first class, he had us so confused we didn't know whether there was a God or not. And he told us to do this. He said, "I want you guys to pray that the Lord not come until the end of the semester. And by then I should have you straightened out about the answers to the questions he had asked us." Typical Ralph. But I loved my time at Freed Hardeman. Most of all, I value the fact that it was there that I met my wife. I actually met her at her boyfriend's house who lived there in Henderson. But we've been married now for 36 years and have a family and a life together that I never would have had. The chances of a boy from West Virginia meeting a girl from Missouri were slim to none without the medium of Freed-Hardeman University. So, you know, years ago, part of our school song had this line in it that said, to thee our dearest FHC, and then it goes on, but there was a line that no longer is in the song as I understand it, but it said this, a debt we owe to thee. And we used to joke about that as students. Yeah, you not a kidding, man. We have a debt that we owe to the school. But in all seriousness, as I reflect, I have a great debt to be paid to Freed-Hardeman. It has enriched my life, and I have nothing but good memories.
It's difficult for me to express exactly what Freed-Hardeman University means to me in just a few words, but I am going to try and do my best. When I think of FHU, the first thing I think of, really the first idea that comes to mind, is one of home. For 9 years, the campus and the community was very literally a home to me, with 5 years spent on the third floor of Paul Gray Hall and 4 years spent in various housing in the community. And even now, Henderson and FHU still feel like home. Whenever my wife and I return to campus, we feel like we've come home. We've had times in our lives that we've suffered some tragedies and setbacks, and one of our first thoughts on those occasions was often, we need to go back to campus for some comfort. Our time, particularly among the people who make up Freed-Hardeman, was so powerful, meant so much to us, that even now we still feel very much welcomed, loved, and safe when we return.
My very first memory of Freed-Hardeman was being a senior in high school and coming to visit the campus. I felt special because my name was called out in chapel. While I was in the Bible bookstore, students came by and said, "Hey, you're that kid from chapel. We're glad you're here." And it really made me feel welcome. I absolutely loved that moment and fell in love with Freed in that very instance. Some of the magical moments. I remember one time it snowed really good. And as we were leaving chapel, Milton Sewell started a snowball fight in the Commons. And that was the coolest moment in the history of the world. Just because he thought to do that, all the kids joined in, we had a good time. It was a lot of fun and certainly unexpected. As far as memories of faculty members at Freed-Hardeman University, I believe I could speak for both of us in saying that Miss Rhonda Jones was pivotal to our success in the university and the education department. If you had a question about anything, if you needed to know anything, you go see Miss Rhonda, and she will treat you like her own. She will take you under her arm. She will walk you through the process. She'll talk to you like a mama too when you mess up. But she was a mom away from mom, and certainly someone I needed while I was there. And the fact that she's not here with us anymore, though she's passed and it's been a little while, it still hurts. But it is impossible for me to think of Freed-Hardeman without thinking of Miss Rhonda. So as an African American attending Freed-Hardeman University, where you're the extreme minority, there are moments that you wish never happened. But of course there are also great moments as well. And a lot of those moments happened just because a lot of people have not experienced being around black people before. You get some of the curiosity questions. Why do black people have gold teeth? Why do they wear do-rags? Why are their clothes so baggy? Why are they always in jail? I mean, and not always coming from hate, but coming because they've never seen a black person to ask these questions of. And so those experiences were challenging, but I had to realize that 99% of it was coming from an honest heart.
For me, I didn't live in the dorms, so I didn't get a lot of those personal questions from people. I had good experiences in my classes, And sometimes I was in the honors program, and so working with Dr. Jenny Johnson, she would try to get me to push the envelope a little, just because she knew of the atmosphere at Freed-Hardeman. It was a good experience for me to find ways to be able to present my points and my arguments and not be offensive to other people, and to be able to open others' minds to different concepts dealing with people of color in the African American community.
Also, I would love for you to imagine this moment. A car full of black people, my mom, my dad, my brother, and myself, coming to Freed-Hardeman for the very first time. And as we get to the edge of campus, we come across the Paul Gray dorm, and there's a 30-foot rebel flag hanging off the front of it. It made all of our stomachs fall. I mean, lump in our throat. My father asked, where am I bringing my son? What is this place? Why is that there? And that was his first introduction to Freed-Hardeman. For me, I had no context of why people would be proud to wear that, to display that. All of my experiences with it have been hurtful and hateful. So I was very confused. I was also confused when I got to second floor Benson, and there's a room, 2 rooms on that floor called the suite. And everything in that room that could have a rebel flag on it had a rebel flag on it. They had rebel flag bed sheets. They had a rebel flag lazy boy. They had a rebel flag refrigerator. They had rebel flags going across the ceiling tiles. I mean, from top to bottom. And I remember thinking, I don't think I'm gonna last long here. However, there was a Saturday that one of the boys were coming out of the room, and he said, hey, what are you up to? You wanna play some video games? I was scared to death, but I did wanna play video games. And so we went in and we played NCAA college football, and I was able to talk to him about the room and just ask why. And I came to understand that there's some pride that Southerners have in their history, and that flag is a part of it. I can't say that I agree wholeheartedly, but it gave me some context and some understanding to know that it's not necessarily hate that they're using it for. And I was also able to provide him with some context and understanding of why that strikes fear in the hearts of African Americans. There has been an evolution in the acceptance and the understanding of minorities at Freed-Hardeman. And the biggest evidence of that was President Shannon at our last lectureship, taking the stage, acknowledging the history that Freed-Hardeman has had with race relations, and apologizing for how it has done some things in the past. To me, that was all I needed, was to have someone acknowledge it, to say it happened, to say it was wrong, to say we shouldn't have done that, and to also commit as a president to say, as long as I'm here, that will never repeat itself, made me so proud of Freed-Hardeman. So much of who I am right now today is because of what I've learned on that campus.
Freed-Hardeman was definitely one of the most amazing experiences where I learned and grew so much within those few short years at Freed-Hardeman. I even kept some of the things from Freed-Hardeman. I have a lot, but I did want to show some of them today. Was definitely memorable. I most definitely had more parking violations than what you see here. Just a confession. Also loved the NB Hardeman postcards. I have some more of those. I won't tell you how many because it's embarrassing, but love me some NB. And these are probably the most important papers that I have. These are more than just papers to me. They're memories. See, these are the programs of every single show that I would help with or be a part of in some way at Freed-Hardeman. My most memorable experiences would have to be with the theater department, where I learned and grew and loved what I did, which was to be a part of theater.
Your relationship with Freed-Hardeman began much before the college age, pretty much most of your life anyway. So what was it like growing up right here around Freed-Hardeman?
When I was 2 years old, my parents, Mike and Jenny Johnson, moved to Henderson to start teaching at Freed. And from then on, I've lived in Henderson, spent many days just sitting in mom and dad's office on campus, running around, did a lot of camps and stuff. I don't know, it's a lot of people say that Freed-Hardeman is their home, right? Because of all the memories they build and the relationships they make while they're students here. But it's home for me too, almost literally, because it's always been where home is, for my whole life. So it's very special to me.
Okay, let's talk about events. As a child, what events did you enjoy, when it was that time of year or whatever the event was? What made you excited?
I did it all. I did everything. I did Horizons. I did Mid-South. Mid-South was a staple, as I'm sure it has been for many, many people. I did Rush every year and Go Camp. A lot of people might remember Go Camp, which ran for a little while. Brad Meineke put that together. That was a blast. I have a lot of fun there. I remember packing food. It was called Manna, I think is the name of the program. And it's just these little packets of food that you fill up. They provide the ingredients and you fill up this packet of food and they deliver it to children in need. And it would be our turn to pack food. And so my friends and I remember Dylan Purvis and Wilson Miskelly and I would just sprint to the gym as fast as we could to get ready because we were in it. Like we were going to pack food as fast as we possibly could, and we were just ridiculous. We made it so much fun, and it was like I was having fun with my friends, but then later on I could look back and think, that wasn't just playing video games with my friends or, telling jokes with my friends. We were actually doing something that mattered. And so that camp was really important. That was kind of the theme, the name Go. It was focused on doing things. Like we would go out and do stuff. And I really appreciated that a lot and got a lot of really good memories that I think have shaped me more than I realize. Freed-Hardeman was a very easy choice. Even when I was trying to decide where to go to school, I think for a lot of people who grew up in Henderson, Freed-Hardeman is a good choice since it's home to them in more ways than one. It was definitely deeper than just, I'm going to go to Freed so that I can go home and eat dinner. It was more than that to me because, like you said, there were people I knew at Freed before I came. I had relationships with professors. I remember people like Keenan Casey and Ashley Casey and how I was friends with them when they were students at Freed-Hardeman. I remember they would babysit me and my brother and my sister, and they would bring their pet bird Oliver. I loved playing with their pet bird Oliver. And so then when I was a student at Freed, he was a professor here, and even though I never had him in class, there were a lot of people like that who I had built relationships with. And so I felt like I was surrounded by friends. I didn't have to worry about stepping into the unknown.
You reminded me of what a young lady said to me a couple of years ago now, but I was asking her about what or how did Freed-Hardeman impact her. And she said, before I came to Freed-Hardeman, I was told that I would make some of my best friends for my life while I'm at Freed-Hardeman. And she said, what I didn't know was that many of those friends would be faculty.
Yeah.
And that's probably somewhat unique for a lot of universities across the country, but definitely it's very much a real aspect and blessing of what we get to enjoy here.
It is definitely true. I've talked to a lot of people about the new perspective I have at a large state school with 30,000 students, classrooms that are huge, and professors that are far away. And being able to compare that to Freed-Hardeman, you'll develop relationships with professors at Freed-Hardeman that are deeper than I think you will at most other schools.
I really enjoyed my time at Freed. I enjoyed the social clubs, the intramural sports, the hanging out with friends and the dorm and just everything about Freed. It was my first Christian home, actually, because I didn't grow up in a Christian home, so this was my chance at having my first Christian family, and Freed-Hardeman was that for me.
I loved to be in making music with Samu, and Josh was not very much into that. He was more into...
I was in the show band.
I really loved doing things with Samu. I really loved making music more than any of that, though. And I may not have gotten a scholarship to participate in making music, but I made friendships that were priceless. While we do hope our boys will one day choose a Christian education, we know that we can only do what we can to encourage that. And we hope that is Freed-Hardeman. You know, that's where Mom and Dad went, so maybe our boys will see that as an opportunity to be like Mom and Dad, or just to choose to have a Christian education, because that's what we really want them to have, is a place to be safe, to grow and to be educated, and to love God, and just to be surrounded with good influences.
We are excited about all the things that we're going to get to do as parents, and we're thankful that Freed-Hardeman gave us that start. So thank you for letting us be a part of the Freed-Hardeman stories.
Yeah, thank you.
My best friend and I, our relationship was formed out of Sigma Rho. We're still best friends today. I adore her. I adore Sigma Rho and what they mean to me. There were so many experiences with SIG. Making music was one of the huge experiences with Sigma Rho. I'll never forget my freshman year when we did Go West, and the feeling that we got when we won, and everybody cheering for you. And it's such a wonderful feeling. The feeling I had when they asked me to be a director my junior year for Love in a Bottle. We were masters and genies. I will never forget that experience ever. We just had such a wonderful time together. And these people, especially the women, you live with them, you know, in your dorm, and you have devos with them, and you worship with them, and they're like your family. And you know that you can go to them, and they're not going to judge you, and they're going to hold your hand, and they're going to pray with you, and they're going to let you know everything's going to be okay, and that they're there for you. And it's a lifetime relationship that you can't get anywhere else. It's so pure and loving, and it's one of the best things I did at FHU was being in Sigma Rho. They're my family forever.
We moved to Somerville, Tennessee when Karen and I were in high school. My father had just finished the Memphis School of Preaching and got a preaching job there at the Macon Road Church of Christ. And so we ended up leaving all of our friends. We tried to run away from home twice, but it was too dark in the country. And so we did graduate from Fayette Ware High School in Fayette County. From there, Dad said, "You're going to Freed-Hardeman." We were like, "What's Freed-Hardeman?" You know, we want to go everywhere else with our friends. We had scholarships to several schools. And so he said, "You're going to Freed-Hardeman." So we came up on a tour one summer and picked our dorms out. And when we came, we never looked back. We've been here now for 23 years. So it has been a true blessing in our lives and has blessed us to continue the tradition with our nieces and nephews as well.
I grew up in a small church, and I enjoyed congregational singing. But when I came to Freed-Hardeman, there were two things that stood out that I really had not experienced much, and that was singing in a large audience such as chapel.
Right.
I remember the first chapel, I was kind of in awe. And but then I also remember some of the groups that performed. And I remember the first time I ever heard Deliverance. And you ladies were a part of Deliverance. Tell us about being a part of that and what that was like.
Well, Deliverance, those were some of the best times of our lives.
We traveled to different states singing and recruiting and all of that stuff. And so we met lifelong friends. It's a wonderful thing. One thing I would like to mention is our director. I guess those of you who were around here, you knew George Hamer. He was our director, and suddenly one of the toughest things we had to do with Deliverance was sing at his funeral. He died before we came back from Christmas break one January.
Yes.
And that was so tough, but we stood on that stage and we held hands and we sang as he would have wanted us to, as he would have directed us. Yes. So that was a tough time, but those times singing with Deliverance across the U.S., those are times that we'll never forget. Those were bonding times.
Yes.
And at Freed Hardeman, that's the kind of experience you get.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I can say Deliverance helped us through a lot more than just singing and going out to meet other sisters and brothers. It was a support, because it wasn't just African American students. We had white students, Asian students that followed us, went on trips with us to help us recruit, and we had great times on the road. And in today's time, with this, I mean, we're living in unprecedented times where things are happening back to back to back to back. And for our students, our prayers go out to them because they've dealt with COVID-19. They've missed their senior year or their ending of the year of school. They've gone through all of the racial divide that's happening now. Yes. However, Freed Hardeman provided a comfort place for us. Even though some of that was happening then, it was our comfort place. It was our home. And that's probably why we never left. So Freed Hardeman is just, man, it's a family that you just love and you're so proud to be a part of. So, I mean, it's awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Freed Hardeman is for everybody, especially in this day and time. We have had such an outpouring on Facebook, calls, all of our Caucasian friends saying, I'm sorry, we had no idea you all ever faced this. Yeah. And it makes you cry. I'm about to tear up now. It really gets to your heart because it's like, these are our sisters and brothers and they get this, you know. They feel this and they're passionate about their apologies. It's like, you don't have to apologize, just you loving me in a Christ-lit manner makes the difference. And man, it's awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, just like that student I had the other night, and she Facebooked me and she said, I love you, Auntie Karen.
Yeah, she did.
Said, I love you too.
And she started crying.
It did, because I was watching the news and all this stuff was happening, and then my phone beeped and I looked at it and said, I love you, Auntie Karen.
Yeah. Yes.
And that was just, that was something.
I mean, the love has been phenomenal. In every man and woman, there's a little boy and girl who learn from all the things they've heard while growing up in this world. Some are raised on love and praise, the others guilt and fears. The seeds of love breed confidence, the other only tears. Hear me calling you, hear me calling you, hear me calling out to you. Mother, father, sister, brother, careful how you treat each other. Children just repeat what they've been shown. Remember, we will reap what we have sown. We will reap what we have sown. Oh, we will reap what we have sown. Love begins at home.
Hey, Freed Hardeman family, happy 150 years. I think the thing that's neatest to me about looking back and thinking about my time there is that I don't have a memory that I can think of at all that's just me. Like I don't have a fond memory where it's just Joey on campus. All of my memories that I've preserved and continue to think about fondly, they're always with someone else. And so when we talk about the value and what's made 150 years so special, it's because you live it out with so many people who were growing closer to the Lord just as you are trying to do. And so whether that's in the classroom setting or making music or intramurals or wherever it is, just goofing off, Devo time in the Commons or in Old Chapel Hall, or if it's in the library, in Gano, wherever it is, to know that you're never alone. It's such a powerful reminder that we need when we are no longer there as students. So I'm so indebted to Freed Hardeman for those relationships that are the basis for all of our memories. The older I get, the more I look back and see the importance and the value of the relationships and the memories that I have with my teachers, my professors, those instructors. They are invaluable to me now. And several have passed on, have met their Savior already, but several remain. And I love that current students today that I interact with and know and love, they can say, and I can say, hey, I had them too. And we get to connect over those common bonds. And I'm thankful they get to have people like Brother Billy and Dr. Powell, and they get to work with Making Music and Student Life with Tony Allen and Mike Craven's then in class, and Greg Massey and Jenny Johnson, Gail McDonald, and I'm sure I'm leaving off some. But I'm so thankful that I get to have these folks, and now current students that I talk with get to have these folks. It's the constant passing of the torch. But then that continues on an extra level when I interact with students today, some of which I have a good relationship with and love them, and get to say, you know, I had those teachers. I was a fellow classmate with those folks. I love that constant cycle, preserving of the generations because of the beauty of God's providence. So I love that students today get to have a dear friend, Dr. James Dalton, in counseling classes. I love that they get to have Matt Cook and Justin Rogers and Corey Markham and Caleb Kersey, Eric Farmer at the Memphis campus, and then now most recently in the Bible department with Donnie DeBoard. I have memories with all of these guys, and I'm so thankful that they're continuing that same heritage of godly people who are helping young people to know the Lord more fully in whatever discipline it is they teach. And so I'm thankful that I'm not unique in that regard. That's been something that's happened generation to generation, and God's faithfulness is seen in those generations. So happy 150 years, and thank you for allowing me to enjoy just a small sliver of that at 150. Here's to many more. May God bless you and all that you do.
God's faithfulness is seen in generations of godly people who help young people to know the Lord more fully. Thanks, Joey, for that beautiful reminder of what makes this place so special. It's the people who've invested so much of themselves in Freed Hardeman as students, faculty, as staff, and more. I hope you were touched, as I was, by these amazing stories tonight. We know that there are many more. We're still collecting them even now. And if you have a story to tell about your time here at FHU, please send your video to alumni@fhu.edu. We want to share it with the dozens of other stories on our website. You'll find that information on our Facebook page. Tonight, we say goodbye to an eventful and yet beautiful 150th anniversary year. It didn't all go exactly as we thought it would, but it was still a great year. We look forward to the stories that Freed Hardeman University will continue to tell for years to come.
Hey David, are you ready to go eat? And Max and Meryl want you to read them a story after dinner.
Thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure for Tracy and me to share in FHU's great story, and whether you still call her FHC or FHU, we hope that you continue to breathe a prayer for Freed Hardeman University. God bless you. Glory be to God, and good night.